Alright. The study of psychology. What is psychology? Psychology is many different things to many different people. It revolves around the brain, what consists of the brain, diseases of the brain, theories behind how that works, and how it's studied and why it's studied. Yeah, and people that study this are called psychologists. So, in my genre 1, I wrote a diary. I contemplated between doing a diary or a movie first, but in order to get like all the knowledge I needed for starting out in my presentation and ultimately in my entire unit, I needed to do more research on the mind, and so I focused more on the realistic than the Hollywood version of it. So I did a diary about a guy named Riley White. So I'll tell you a little bit about that diary. Riley White starts out, well, let me start over. Riley White starts as a little kid, and Riley has a kind of disturbed childhood, like not bad, that affects his mind at all, but like very poor, very unsuccessful, very alone. Mom's always working, works hard, doesn't have a father, and kind of relies on himself for everything. So when he's bored, he just goes outside, hits baseballs, throws footballs around, plays basketball, does his homework, and Riley starts to grow up. He goes out of that childhood stage into adolescence and starts to be really good at education. He maintains a 4.0 all the way through high school and is really, really good at baseball as well. And people start to notice that. He's a 5-star recruit for baseball. MLB wants him straight out of high school, but Riley doesn't know if that's really what he wants for himself, if he wants to go to a very prestigious school like Stanford or something like that, because they're giving him scholarships too, if that's how smart he was, or if he wanted to make $1 million coming out of high school. And Riley, being that poor kid, living in poverty his whole life, kind of looked at one situation as the best right away to help his family, his mom. And so he signed a 3-year contract with the Mets and did that instead of going to Stanford. Riley did well his first half of the season and then kind of slowed down. And he never really got back up on the horse to meet the expectations of the New York Mets, and Riley ultimately got cut. So Riley started playing for about 3 other MLB teams, and before they cut him down to minor leagues. So Riley was kind of feeling that unsuccessfulness in his head and kind of knew what was going to happen. So at the age of 31, he retired from baseball and wanted to still stay in the business of baseball, so he became a baseball manager for the same team he got drafted by, the New York Mets, and they didn't really know what to expect because he was a really unsuccessful player, so how could he know what success is as a manager? But a few years in, Riley kind of started off having that midway, but it was getting better and better and better, and so they finally got to the playoffs as Riley as manager, and they won. They won their first championship 3 years into managing, Riley was, and they continued that success for 3 more years, 3 straight championships, and Riley was really happy. He finally knew what it was like to be a champion of something, and he started making money, lots of money, and he met his wife eventually at one of the business meetings on like his 15th year of managing, so he was pretty old. He was like 46, and his wife was pretty young. She was like 35, and him and her hit it off right away. She was an executive for another baseball team. I can't remember what I wrote, but they eventually bought a house together and eventually tried to conceive a child, and they did. And Riley finally knew what it was like to have a perfect life. So one day, after his wife kept begging him, he went outside and painted the house. And this was like 20 years into managing, so he was like 54 or something like that. And their daughter was already born, 2 years old, and Riley started painting the house, like I said, and he fell off the ladder, broke something, and had to get x-rays, obviously. And when he was in the x-ray room, the doctors told him more than just what he knew was already broke. The x-rays showed something in his mind, which was a mental illness that they know as Alzheimer's. And Alzheimer's is a disease which affects your recollection of things, your memory, who you know around you, and eventually just deteriorates your mind. You become alone, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know who you are, and you don't know how you got there. So the doctor told Riley that, and Riley told his wife. They were devastated because they just had a 2-year-old son, and the doctor also told him that effects would start kicking in about 8 years. Because it was about this big right now, and it's growing steadily every year. So Riley kind of waited it out, didn't really want to accept what was happening to him, and his wife was kind of begging him to do the treatment, do the cures, take the pills, and Riley never did. So Riley ended up, about 6 years later, getting it faster than the doctor thought, and he started forgetting everything. He'd wake up at night in cold sweats and not remember where he was, who his wife was, and start rampaging around the house. And soon his wife had no choice but to send him to a mental facility. Mental facility. First, to try and help him, and they couldn't help him because it was just too late, and he just never wanted to act on it because it was just too hard to accept it. And Riley soon had to be enrolled in a retirement home because he needed people to take care of him because his wife couldn't take care of 2 people, especially an old man that couldn't remember where he was. So eventually Riley comes to the conclusion that he's forgetting everything, can't remember his wife, even his daughter, and can't remember a baseball, anything like that. So he had the bright idea to write his life down in a journal, and Riley started from where I just started and came all the way to the bottom, and eventually it got slower. The journal entries became farther apart, shorter, and Riley soon forgets to write in his journal as well, and places it somewhere he can't find it. So eventually Riley loses himself and everything he knows and becomes alone in the world, and leaves his wife and child to live by themselves because that's what Riley wanted ultimately. Before he forgot everything, he told his wife to go on without him, find someone new, and she kind of had to because Riley wouldn't take a no for an answer. So, and then Riley obviously ended up dying with this disease, but in the scheme of things, Riley had a very successful life, more than he thought he would, and his wife will pass down his legacy along with his daughter. So Riley was kind of content at the end of his life, but didn't want to accept it, so it kind of resulted in his death. But I kind of wanted to write that because it helped me with Alzheimer's, which is a very known disease. According to Mental Health Association, 50% of people that contract Alzheimer's forget who they are, who they were, and ultimately forget everything, but not all of them forget everything. And I kind of wanted to reflect on the 50% that's in the bad scheme of things instead of the 50% that are good, because I wanted to know what's the worst thing that could happen in case I knew someone or I contracted this. And ultimately, it was a learning lesson for me because I researched, I dug into it, and everything I learned was factual. And this was ultimately really scary for me, and I like to go towards things that scare me. So I really, really liked my genre one. It was probably one of my favorites, and I love doing the journal entry. Any questions? All right, sounds great. Okay, so my genre two, I did end up doing the movie review, the Hollywood movie review, on a movie. And the movie is Joker. And our protagonist is Arthur Fleck. Arthur Fleck is a man that suffers from many mental disorders, which is why I decided to do a movie review, because this movie is entirely based on mental disorders. From start to end, nothing is normal. But this movie does a really, really good job on staying factual, because everyone kind of knows this guy from Batman comic books not being realistic, kind of just all that fictional stuff. But the director, Todd Phillips, kind of wanted to reflect on the realistic part of the mind and how it can really affect a person outcasted from society and kind of thrown out by his own family and not growing up with a father. Everything in between that kind of makes a psycho. And that's why I really wanted to do this, because I just thought it was really interesting, and I did learn a lot from it. So if you ever want to watch a movie based on mental disorders, this is a really, really good one. And so I'm going to go over 4 of the diseases that are throughout the movie, and I'll give you some examples in the movie. Hang on, I'm clicking with my toes here. Okay, so pseudobulbar disease is a disease that is the inability to control your emotions. Another example of this is like uncontrollable laughter, crying, anything in between like that, getting mad easily. That's kind of what that is. Like, you can see that in the movie throughout with his laughing. It's kind of sad because he can't control it. It's a cause from a nervous system disorder. So it's kind of like adapting to your environment is what it is, trying to get attention. And Arthur really gets nervous around people, he's really antisocial, so when he gets yelled at, thrown out, someone's crying around him, he'll start laughing uncontrollably, which is something we perceive as people as being really rude when serious situations. So it doesn't really end well for Arthur at all any of the time, so it's kind of sad in the movie. And then the next one is schizophrenia. And this is probably the most common disease in the movie. Schizophrenia is a mental disorder which involves the breakdown in the relation between thought, emotion, and behavior. And you can see this like in Arthur's mother, in Arthur, and many of the characters throughout the movie. Nobody really knows what they want, what makes sense, and how to reflect their emotions and behavior. This can result in fantasies also and delusions, which you can see with Arthur's girlfriend throughout the movie. She was never really there. Arthur projects her because he's lonely and he needs someone to talk to. So, and you also get this with Arthur's mother, with Thomas Wayne. She thinks that's her husband, Arthur's father, and makes Arthur think that is his father, which was really hard on Arthur throughout the movie. So that was really a key disease throughout the movie. And that kind of embodies what Arthur is as a schizophrenic, and ultimately that results in him being a psychopath. I think this one right here. But the next one is dissociative identity disorder. And this is a disorder which allows the brain to believe it has multiple identities, which is, I'll go back for you guys, which is obvious right here. But it's kind of flip-flopped in the movie, which is awesome. This is Arthur at first, when he's really upset, when he's kind of distraught with society, when he's alone, when he doesn't know what he is. And soon, Arthur turns into this. And why this is flip-flopped is because Arthur is more comfortable with the makeup on than he is with his face. He doesn't like to be at the bottom like everyone thinks he should be, and this is what he thinks that is. And with the face paint on, it gives him a sense of courage, entitlement, and power to stand up to those that have wronged him and to talk to people more fluently without the disease. It's like throughout the movie he just gets better and better and better, but that's because he's progressing into this man instead of this guy. You still see the disorders right here, but right here it's more common. So it's like and these are multiple identities because he's a different person without it, and he's a different person with it. So that's where I see dissociative identity, mainly just with him, because he kind of needs that to be who he is. Because this isn't who he is. This is a mask he wears for society to believe that he is poor and doesn't matter to anyone. And this is what he wears when he needs to be powerful, be himself, and stand up to those that have wronged him. And that's also something I really liked about the movie. It shows the realistic side of what it is to be outcast by society, and Arthur in this movie really reflects that, I think, in the dissociative identity disorder. Okay, so the last one is a sociopath. When people usually think of a sociopath, though, they think of like a completely crazy freak, but that's not really what it is. It's a disease which makes you antisocial in attitude and behavior, and you see this throughout the entire movie. This is what Arthur is a sociopath, and his mother is a sociopath, and people he works with, the people that follow him, it's just common. A lot of people are sociopaths, but every psycho usually ends up being a sociopath. So those were the 4 main diseases I saw throughout the movie that taught me a lot about the mind, the brain, and psychology, ultimately. So yeah, and this is just a picture of all the disorders. You kind of see throughout the movie also, but like I said. So any questions? All right. So genre 3, I didn't really feel complete yet. Like, I knew what psychology was, how psychology was made, what goes into psychology. So I wanted to do, like, way more than what I was doing, because I was kind of being more detailed than I was looking at it from the outside in. So I did an entire website that I will go to right now. And that was the start of my website. And in this, also, I kind of wanted to reflect on the psychologists that made it, but I also did studies and theories. Ultimately, this was just fun for me, so I didn't really do it because I needed more points or anything like that. I just did it because I really, really liked it. Really liked what I was doing, and it's not loading in yet. Okay. So I'm only going to go over the psychologists. Actually, I'm going to go over all of it because I feel like you guys need to know this stuff. Okay, so I'm only going to do brief explanations of these. So Cognitive psychology is the study of mental processes that use attention, language, memory, and problem solving, creativity, and thinking. So that's like math and science. That's like learning, is what that is. So that's what that is a study of. That's one of them. These are four main ones. There's other ones, but this is four main ones that I saw that really reflect in our society that we study. And the next one is forensic psychology. This is what like lawyers do when they need to get cases. They kind of dive into the mind of their clients. You know, they get to know them a lot more. They study them. They study how they did it. Like if it's murder per se, they kind of have to be that person to know what they're doing, which alters the mind sometimes, makes you kind of insane. Social psychology obviously is interaction with people and how you react with people and how people react with you and how that has an effect on your brain. So like if you're antisocial, you probably have had a memory of someone letting you down or not being very vocal. You're kind of scared to talk out because maybe you won't be like everyone else, you know? So you see this one a lot with high school kids, kids in general actually, and some adults, but usually you grow out of it. And developmental psychology is kind of obvious too. It's like it studies as a kid through adolescence and then adult years. So I don't know who studied this, but it's kind of just like a study of a human throughout his life. His or her life, I should say. So yeah, they're pretty, these are the four common ones, and they're not very hard to remember. Okay, so now I'll just go through some of the theories. Actually, I'm going to do psychologists. Because the theories have to do with the psychologists. Sorry, I have really bad internet too. Okay, so these are kind of like the founders. Well, they are the founders of psychology, and this is the part I really felt interested in when doing Genre 3. Because I felt this is something everyone needs to know before they get into all of it, you know? But I'll get to these guys. Sigmund Freud, kind of like the first one. You know, when you think of a psychologist, you think of someone sitting down in front of you and talking to you about your problems. This guy invented that. Psychology used to be just, you look at a brain after someone's deceased and you study them. And you study someone that's just standing, walking, what they do. But Sigmund Freud kind of like broke that barrier into really, really getting into someone's mind and trying to free them from their problems, their disorders, and he had a lot of success with that and became kind of a giant, a legend in psychology. And yeah, so a lot of what I wrote about goes to him, and my research paper, I did a lot of research on him because I thought he would help me get through it the most because he knew the most about psychology. The next one is B.F. Skinner. I really don't know if you guys can see any of this, but psychologists also help with kids. Like Mrs. Durbin is kind of a psychologist, Mrs. Majerus. That was not a thing before like 1930, 1940, because B.F. Skinner was the one that created that. He's the one that ultimately helped kids get through their environments in school and helped them receive the education that they needed, even if they had these disorders or they were kind of lower in learning than the other kids. So like B.F. Skinner has really helped our education and the success in which our schools have come out to. So a lot of psychology goes to him too. He was really really into it and really loved kids. So I really liked B.F. Skinner too. And Jean Piaget is another psychologist. He was second. He was the second one right behind B.F. Skinner, but right in front of Sigmund Freud. And he was also a huge developer on education, child development, more like, so developmental psychology. He looked at a kid, and this is more for like the special education kids, I'd say. So him really have, John Piaget and B.F. Skinner have really helped our school systems out in like the same but different ways that have made America successful and made the world a better place ultimately. So, and this guy is pretty cool too. He's still alive. Again, he's also education, but he's social. So like antisocial kids. So yeah, he helped antisocial kids out in school. They didn't want to come to school because they were just too afraid of people. He'd do one-on-ones with them like a psychologist does with an adult if they have mental issues or something like that. But he'd help little kids and high schoolers as well if they were too scared to come to school or too afraid to see other people. He'd do one-on-ones with them and help them through their problems. Constructive self-efficiency is kind of what I relate to him when I think of Bandura. And he's still alive, which is pretty incredible because he's about to be 100. So maybe being a psychologist makes you live longer, I don't know. So now I'm going to backtrack to the theories, which a lot of these guys have had. And this is what psychologists kind of do. They make theories. So a lot of theories are related to psychologists, like that's how you remember them. And if you're going into the field of psychology, you need to remember certain theories. And so I have 8 right here that I kind of have in my head. So I'm going to go over those real quick. I'll go through them really fast. Piaget theory of development, that's kind of what I said. It's on cognitive development. And to words that won't make sense to a lot of you, it focuses on the sensors, like the way you walk into a classroom and what you see is, and how that reflects into your brain. And it also works on how you work on your work, like what is your efficiency, what's your drive to do what you do. That's his theory, and that's what he wanted to do his life work on. And he did a really good job because people have a higher success nowadays, according to Very Simply Mind. Piaget has increased school by about 23%, which is huge because it wasn't always like bad in the first place, but now it's very successful. And psychoanalytic theory, that's Sigmund Freud's one-on-one conversations with people, trying to help them out in any way you can. And he kind of created, when I think of Sigmund Freud, I think of psychology, because he kind of created everything in between, because before you didn't really talk to people, and Sigmund Freud really got into that and kind of broke those boundaries on what is right, what is wrong. And so now people are more understanding, more cooperative with talking to people if they have a psychology degree. And Sigmund Freud kind of made it a more outgoing field to drive into, which is what I thought was pretty cool too. Operant conditioning is a theory that B.F. Skinner had that things happen in a way that you can't control. Like, in your mind, you know this is going to happen, so it's going to happen in this way. So because of this, there's going to be consequences, is mainly what he's saying. And he didn't really dive into his whole life on that, but he did have really good points on if you do something, there's going to be consequences that reflect that, and you know what those consequences are going to be, but you're going to do it anyway. And so he kind of brought the mind out a little bit more, B.F. Skinner did. So we owe that to him. And social learning theory, that has to do with Jean Piaget, and it's a learning process in social behavior which proposes that new behaviors can be acquired by observing and imitating others. So what that means is that, like, I see someone across the room doing something and it's successful, I'm probably going to do that. And if I see someone on the other end of the room doing something bad, I probably won't do that. And that is probably the truest thing, because that's kind of where the word leader came from. Followers, leaders. Oh, sorry. And so you'll see social learning theory everywhere you go in this school, and pretty much in a society, in the world. Yeah, so that was a pretty big one. Oh no, this is really hard. Alright, so two-factor theory is by another guy. I did studies on, like, these are main theories, but they're not all from the psychologists I went all over, and this is a guy by the name of Spearman. Developmental theory, or two-factor theory, is a factor analysis. This theory was based on the trait organization based on the statistical analysis of test scores. He pointed out that all intellectual activities have one common factor called the general factor. He advanced a number of ways we do tests as a country. Okay, so as you'll see, a lot of psychologists kind of work with kids because that's where their brain is really developing. I kind of forgot to point that out, but you'll really see a brain, like the studies, how it works and which ways it works when kids are developing into it, you know. You wouldn't do a study on an adult because they already know what they know, and it's kind of hard to teach an adult because they already, like I said, know what they know. They don't want to learn anything more. They don't want to be studied on. So the Spearman theory, or the two-factor analysis theory, is a theory that kind of reflects on scores, like tests. Okay, so the ACT, everyone goes into the ACT thinking about the time, right? And that's like a mental thing. If you can get over that mental lapse, usually those are the ones that do better. Not always, though. I'm not saying that. But tests usually scare people a lot more than just doing quizzes or assignments, and that's in the mind because you know that that's going to be worth more, that's going to happen, and he kind of wanted to reflect on that because he wanted successful students. So he kind of was against testing as a country, and it didn't really do anything, but he did prove a lot of points, like I just said. Okay, so the next one is multiple factor theory, and this is by Thurstone. This theory proposed that that intelligence is composed of several different types. The 7 primary models used in this theory were verbal, comprehension, word fluency, number facility, spatial visualization, associative memory, perceptual speed, and reasoning. Yep, that's 8. Couldn't tell you. And so what he's saying is that intelligence is not always based off of one factor, like we are led to believe sometimes. It's based off what you see, what you hear, what you learn, how you learn it, who's teaching you, and the way you and how you remember that. If it recalls to you in a certain way, then you'll probably remember it differently. Like flashcards is what he's saying. And that's kind of what he created, was flashcards. Like the way you study, kind of like Quizlet. He kind of created that because people remember things when they study it more and more. That's what he did. Constitutional psychology. I can't remember this one here. Let me read it. This theory attempted to associate his somatotype classifications with human temperament types. Okay, so the foundation of these ideas originated with Francis Galtano and eugenics. The system of somatotyping is still in the use of field of psychology education. Okay, so this is like if you get mad really easy, that disease I was talking about with the movie is what I'm trying to remember. Okay, so it's a schizophrenia. Like if you're schizophrenic, then this theory kind of helps you. He tried to help people with like diseases like that, and he did really well with it, and that's why it says it's still being used in the field of education today. But that also means that it hasn't been cured yet. So They're working really hard on that. Okay, so the attachment theory suggests that children come into the world with a biological pre-programmed outline to form attachments with others because this will help them survive. To me, that seems really obvious that people need to be with other people to survive, because you see this in the wilderness, you see this in the wild. You never see a deer running alone. You always see them in packs. You always see wolves in packs. I think this is true as well. I mean, you can survive on your own, but eventually you're going to find someone that's going to help you survive. You're going to learn from something. You're going to use someone to get through your life, whether that's emotional, physical, or just in any way you need them, really. To me, that's pretty obvious. So that is my genre 3. I put a lot of information into it just because I wanted to learn more, and I felt like this helped me through my entire presentation, especially my research paper, because I had a lot of information on here already that I could use on my research paper, and I could cite it all. And yeah, I was really happy I did this one. Helped me tremendously throughout the entire unit. So that's all for genre 3. So I'll go back. Present. Full screen. Boom. Okay, so now for my product. There's an image, but I'm going to show you way closer. Okay, so I kind of made my product on the first day. So here's my product. As you can see in both pictures, I drew a brain, and what part of the brain, certain things, certain mental aspects come from that side of the brain on that part of the brain. So I'll go over those real quick with you, and this is kind of my drawing. I have no idea if you can see this or not because I'm filming this on an iPhone, so I'm really sorry if you can't see my brain at all, because it's actually pretty cool. Okay, so this green part right here where the line divides it on the front, it's called the frontal lobe. This reacts with high-level learning, helps with risks and rewards, regulates and entertains and thoughts. So like the frontal lobe helps you learn, memory, helps with risks and rewards. Okay, so yeah, so if you're going to go into a situation, you know what you're doing, you know what you're going to get out of it, the cause and effect of that, that's where you get that right here. You get the kind of common sense idea from risk and reward from right here. And it regulates emotions and thoughts, so sadness, mad, curiosity, everything right here. Green part, that's big. Frontal lobe is probably the biggest part of the brain. And so I'll just move on. I'll go through it slowly. I really hope you can see this, or else it's going to ruin everything. Parietal lobe, right here, is the blue one. And this is connection. Communication with other lobes. Multitude is responsible for sensory integration, activates each time and thought changes. So this is where you connect to people. Communication, being antisocial, this is where that goes. Right here. School. Sigmund Freud, right here. This is what he studied, this part of the brain right here. And partial lobe is really the second most important part, because like that theory stated before, you kind of need others to survive, so your communication skills come from the parietal lobe. And is responsible for sensory integration, so like what you see, what you perceive around you, how you see it, and in what ways that can affect you. So what you see through your eyes, smell, taste, whatever, sensories. Okay, so this is your optical, tells you what you see. So this kind of senses what you see, but it doesn't control your eyes. This controls your eyes right here, this orange part of the brain. yeah, that's pretty much it. Just controls your eyesight. This purple part right here is the big part right here. Is your temporal lobe. Auditory processing tells you what you fear in memory. Some auditory memory balance helps you keep your balance. Okay, so this is like sports. If you're ever going to do a theory about like sports or fears, this is where you go. This is big also, but it's not as big as these two. This, if, I don't want to say that. For like balance and stuff, I wanted to say that if this part is like, if you don't use this part as much, you probably won't be as athletic, but I don't want to say that. And because I don't know if that's true, but that's usually what it is, because you only can use certain parts of your brain at once. And so usually this kicks in. That's why in big games, big situations, you also have that fear factor, because this is the same part of the brain where that kicks in. And yeah, so fear and memory and balance. Sports. Purple. Okay, so this tan part down here is the brain stem, and regulation helps regulate heart rate and breathing. Oh, so just all just the main stuff right here. So like if you break off your brain stem, you're gone. You're dead. This just connects your brain to the rest of your body, which is pretty obvious. And then this is the cerebellum, which is also a really big part. Autopilot helps control coordination and balance. So sports, again, right here. And when you're not paying attention. So like this is the part you go to for most of your like memories, but they're more like hallucinations, when you're kind of just spacing off and you're just thinking about something else. This is where you go. This is what you're thinking about right here. So that's my product, and to me this was really awesome, because I didn't know any of this, to be honest. I knew about the brainstem because that's pretty obvious, but I didn't know that you only can work certain parts of your brain at once, and that each part is huge in the way you recall things and the way you use it, the way it affects athleticism, memory, senses, everything. I knew the brain was huge, but I didn't know you could only use one part and that it was divided into 5 pieces. I did not know that, and to be a psychologist, I felt this was very well needed. And as an at-home project, this was pretty good, because it taught me a lot also. And yeah, I'm just really happy with that. So okay, so that's everything in between my presentation, start to end. So I had a lot of fun this year doing this project. 4 months or 5 months of whatever it was, because I wanted a start to an end for psychology, because I'm going into it for college, and I wanted to know if it was a good choice for me, and I'm really, really liking it, because it's helping me understand my life more and others around me, and it's made me more of an optimist, because everyone kind of relates to me the quote, "It's all mental," and to me everything is mental, and that's what I've got from here. So if I'm in a bad situation, if something's wrong with me or someone else is wrong, it's kind of just like perceived in my head as fear. I kind of go to that temporal lobe, just the fear factor just kicks in, but then I remember it's all in my head, and I just have to calm down and breathe, and this really has brought me to that point of understanding and being kind of just a normal person, because it also helped me through a lot of things, because I've been through a lot in the last 2 years, and I really, really wanted to reflect on my brain, how that's working, and how I perceive things, and how others perceive me, which I don't really care about, but it's good to know that stuff. And so yeah, I had a lot of fun this year. Senior year was fun. It ended weird, as you know, but I thank a lot of people, but I really want to thank you, Mrs. Ceransoni, because you helped me get through a lot of hard times in my life. And without you, I don't think I could have done as well as I've done in school, because you're the only teacher that's really helped me, that's really like connected with me. And I really appreciate you for that. And I just wanted to say thank you, because I don't know if I'm going to be able to say thank you. And I hope this presentation was good. I don't know if you could see my product, which really makes me mad, because I'm doing it on a crappy iPhone 7. And so that's my senior project.